Hey guys, this is Steve in Corvallis. As we get set to hit week 9 of the college football 2013 schedule, predictions, and our card here, it's a really big card, so we're going to get right to it. And the first play that we're going to handicap here is the one right here in town, featuring Stanford at Oregon State here in Corvallis. We're going to go against our home team here and pick Stanford in this game. They're favored by 5. I don't think that's nearly enough for Oregon State to cover or to come real close to that game. Strangely enough, the players and students and everyone here in town is so angled towards next week's game with SC here, kind of like when UCLA comes in basketball, or maybe in the Big 12, or when Kansas comes in hoops, or Big 10 when Michigan comes in football. SC is that marquee, still is that marquee name still. It's Dad's weekend next weekend. It's a very difficult ticket. Players are trying to trade up for swap tickets to get family here and all kinds of things. There's so much conversation about next Friday's game. There's surprisingly very little about this week's game. OSU is very banged up still. Offensive line with Sapolo out. Not a good recipe to face that physical Stanford front seven. Particularly, as we said last week, someone's going to force Oregon State to have to run the ball. They're second worst in FBS and rushing. Stanford's probably that team to do this. It just is not a good setup for Oregon State. It's a late game. It's just not a good setup for the Beavers in this spot. They're feeling very good about themselves, 4-0 in the conference. When you look at the teams that they've beaten in this conference, those teams are combined 2-13. Take Oregon State's wins out of that, they're 2-9. So they've, even as Ted Miller with ESPN, fully expected the Beavers to be 7-0 at this point, not 6-1. And so at this point, we like Stanford in this spot big. And that's just our first play there, going against our hometown Beavs, and that's how we see it. So we're going to switch over to some games in the Big 12. There's two of them we really like. The first one is Texas Tech and Oklahoma in Norman. We really like Oklahoma here. Texas Tech is the hot team. They're undefeated. Oklahoma's on an 0-3 run against the spread. They're struggling offensively, particularly throwing the ball, surprisingly. Yet a lot of folks are overlooking their defense. Their pass defense is superb. Number 1 in the Big 12. Number 6 overall defense in FBS right now. Oklahoma is just so solid defensively, and particularly that secondary is easily number 1 in the Big 12, which is just the right recipe to face a team like Texas Tech. I really like Oklahoma, and even though they're 7-point favorites, I think they'll roll Tech in that game. Also like Texas at TCU +2. Texas is also very much maligned for those 2 losses that they have. First in the game that they lost to BYU, where they really got run out. But they're facing a team in TCU that has been very inept as of late. And Texas is, particularly offensively, they've been very paltry, particularly with Boyklin having to substitute the quarterback role for the senior Patchell. Casey Patchell is out, as we know, and their passing numbers have dropped off precipitously. And we really like Texas's defense. Pass defense is not going to be as exposed against TCU. This just looks like a very good spot for Texas here, and we like Texas +2 at TCU. Now moving on to Friday night's game with Brigham Young and Boise State. This is a fascinating matchup because Boise State's in the almost exact opposite position that they were in 2 weeks ago out in Logan, Utah, when they faced a Utah State team that had just lost their leading their leader and signature player in Chucky Keaton. Now Boise State is without their quarterback, senior quarterback Southwick, with a broken ankle, out for the season. They lost their leader. Boise State lost their leader in Southwick. They're somewhat despondent. Last week I mean, he was lost on the first play of the game versus Nevada at home. Boise State was down for a long time in that game as heavy more than 3 touchdown favorites against Nevada. They eventually pulled away, and their quarterback wasn't bad, Hendrick. He's 30 for 38 in his 2-year career there in Boise, but this is the first time in a key road spot as the man, as the guy to lead that team. This is a tough spot. Brigham Young is just the quintessential tough, tested team that is veteran team. They've been challenged with a robust schedule. We really like this spot for Brigham Young, again, as a 7-point favorite. I think BYU is primed to win that game by 17 or 20 points, something like that. I really like BYU in that spot. Couple more games we've got here. Wake Forest at Miami. All the controversy swirling around Coral Gables all week about what would happen with the sanctions. We know they essentially got a slap on the wrist, and Golden's done a terrific job down in at Miami. Miami escaped last week. They're still undefeated, as we know. This Wake Forest team is a compelling team in and of themselves. They truly struggled out of the gate of this season, but yet now they have they've stacked up some 2 pretty impressive back-to-back conference wins, and they're 2-0 in the conference, 2-2 in the conference after 2 pretty sketchy looking losses. So they've really righted themselves. I mean, Wake Forest had an embarrassing home loss to Louisiana Monroe. They got absolutely rolled by Clemson. Yet, in the meantime, they've taken down NC State and Maryland in pretty decent fashion with over 100-plus yards margin versus both of those somewhat decent teams. So we really like Wake Forest to cover here versus kind of a sluggish starting Miami team. It's an early game. It's a noon start Eastern. So we really don't think, even though Wake Forest is somewhat weak offensively, 13th out of 14 teams in the ACC, they're versus a Miami team that's been penalized a lot. They're 10th or 12th in the ACC in penalty yards. Wake Forest has been quite good. They have a great front three. They play a 3-4 defense. 3 seniors on their front three have them at number 3 rush defense in the ACC, which is fairly good in that rushing conference with Georgia Tech and those teams. So that's a great spot. Wake Forest plus 23 at Miami. Another quick game that we like, that this kind of goes against some of the statistics we usually look at with these kinds of matchups, and that is Rutgers -7 at home against Houston. Now, Houston is a pretty prolific offensive team, and Rutgers' pass defense has been very, very suspect. Of course, they have played Rutgers has played Carr in Fresno. They've played some difficult teams that sling it around a lot. So I think that's a misleading number. Yet they are lowest in the AAC in pass defense, and that's going up against the Houston team that really puts up yards and really puts up points. But Houston had a really rough loss last week by 1 point versus Brigham Young at home, where they hung in. They just could not win that game. So now they travel cross country in an early start at Rutgers in New Jersey. So that's kind of a tough spot for them. We also like Penn State plus 14.5 at Ohio State. Penn State is number 3 defensively in the Big Ten. They're up against an Ohio State team that that come to you want to talk about penalty yards. Ohio State's piled up a lot of penalty yards, and that's just a spot that we really like Penn State, and they're number 3 Big Ten defense against an Ohio State team that seems to play up and down to their competition. That just seems like a good value at over 2 touchdowns to take a Penn State team to hang around with Ohio State, and that's possibly like a 9 to 12 point win at the very most for Ohio State. I really see that as a 24-20 type of an Ohio State win. So that's the card. Oh, we also have a 1 unit play with Boston College plus 7.5. It's just a nice spot for Boston College. And their running back, Andre Williams, 140 yards rushing a game. He's been very prolific lately. BC has been a resurgent team. They've given every team except Southern Cal a really good, solid run. They fought Clemson and Florida State to very close losses. And versus an NC team that's 1-5 that gave Miami a great scare, but other than that, their numbers do not look good. It's in fact, North Carolina's rush defensive numbers are not very good. That's just the recipe for a Boston College team to really make some hay and just grind them down, possibly win that game. So that's our card, and I want to thank everybody for watching these, and everyone go make some money. I guess go Beavs, even though money's money. I guess we win either way. Beavers win. I'll gladly pay $200 to watch the Beavers win. Rather see them win, but I don't think they will. So that's what we've got, and I want to thank everybody, and we'll talk to you real soon. Go Beavs.